So in binaural beats, there's not rhythmic elements commonly because of that. You want the listener to lose track of time, as it were, to further sink into the actual effect of the thing. So musically, there's generally just kind of textural things. Some people use nature sounds and stuff. It is interesting how the musical quality works as a sort of obfuscation of the technical element in some way. So you sort of aren't really focused on that as much. You're listening to the top layer, and the bottom layer is doing all the dirty work.
Cory bloody Allen in the building. How are you, friend?
I'm good, man. How's your Achilles?
It's slowly reattaching my leg to my foot, which is
nice.
What I wanted. I've been walking around for quite a while in flip-flops in Dubai, to which my physiotherapist said, cut them up and throw them in the bin immediately. But yeah, I'm back. I'm back in the UK, a little bit of a tan, and ready to get back on the rehab.
That sounds like a coming-of-age novel, Flip-Flops in Dubai.
Yeah, it is. I found myself, and it was a proper pair of shoes.
Nice, man. Well, I'm glad it's healing. I just remembered that as we started here.
Yeah, it was a serious setback. But honestly, man, I found a level of fortitude that kind of came out of me that I didn't even know existed. It was so bizarre. I thought I knew. It was like opening a door inside of a house I'd lived in my entire life to a room that I didn't know existed. And very much kind of found a level of resilience that was almost like, it was almost endogenous. It almost surfaced when it was needed, in a way that kind of makes me question about just how cerebral and just how much I know about myself.
Yeah. So what were you fighting against?
It was more that I presumed when I would reach a setback like that, some serious trauma, that I've gone through periods of depression and sadness and stuff like that before. And I just thought, oh man, my constitution is not going to do well with this kind of a setback, despite all of the stoicism and fantastic guests I've spoken to on this show and all the rest of it. I just presumed that I didn't think I had the sort of makeup that would deal with it fantastically well. And honestly, like a lot of it was hard work, and I can be proud of the development in myself that I've done to get myself to that point. But there was something else as well. There was another few gears inside of me that I didn't know I was going to find. And I didn't have the world-ending inertia that I perhaps feared was going to occur, and very quickly was able to focus on doing what I could do. And you hear this all the time, right? You hear about people who go through tragedies and who end up using that as the springboard for something even greater. It's kind of just, it's a bit like a fable, that, isn't it? You just think, well, yeah, that's good for them.
Yeah. And it's also kind of good and bad, because that's one of the things that is sort of a problem in culture right now, is the inability for people to accept themselves just as people. Like everything has to be this extraordinary, hero's tale, and no one's allowed to just like be a person. So like it makes people feel like if you're injured and you have this Achilles, time that you need to spend kind of just low key relaxing, there's this weird feel because of sort of internet culture in some way that it's like, well, if you aren't using that as a springboard to change your life, then you're a loser, and it's like, no, it's also okay just to sit and do nothing and just be a person and be all right for a minute,
Yeah, that's a function of seeing the highlight reel of everybody else, right? That
totally.
Almost any incident is also a potential for content.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So it's like, unless you're taking a selfie whilst the operation's going on and recording a podcast, and then it's got to be in the newsletter, and everyone just feels like a budget Gary V. So I get that very, very much. So today I wanted to talk about, we've already had you on the show. You were episode like 12, and this is going to be 250 something. So everyone that wants to find out about your approaches for meditation, go back and listen to that. It was a fantastic episode. But today, your other, I guess, internet commodity that you travel in, that you end up shipping, is Binaural Beats. And it's something that myself and some of the other guys I regularly have on the show, we have played around with, we use. I know Johnny's a huge fan of Brain FM. He also uses some of your tracks as well to work to and to sleep to and for meditation. But I've never really heard anyone give a breakdown of what binaural beats are, why they exist, what their effects are, how they're made, all that stuff. So I wanted to get yourself in to kind of break down the fourth wall a little bit about it. So where do we begin?
Man, absolutely. Yeah. Well, thanks for having me on, and I'm happy to dive into it with you. Well, I think that beginning with just kind of defining some terms is useful because, like meditation, dealing with anything that's sort of effervescent, or it's like it's not a physical thing, so it's kind of conceptual. Like audio is a bit harder to grasp for some people. So just sort of introducing what the binaural beats are. So first off, binaural means basically stereo. So monaural is like one single sound source. So if you think in your headphones or whatever, you've got a left and a right headphone. That's left and right. So it's two bi, and then aural. So it's two sound. And a monaural would be a single mono signal, which is like an old record player or something that has like the horn, the gramophone player, or just the horn coming out. That's mono. That's one. But also all like voice recordings are mono. And for a bit of useless more detail, I will say that in most mono sounds that you hear, they're split to stereo. So it's the same thing coming through both speakers, but it's just, it's still mono. Anyway, so then the beats part of binaural beats. So binaural is, two audio signals, and beats is beating. So in music, there's a phenomenon called beating. And that is whenever you have two audio frequencies, which of course all sound and music are all audio frequencies. Whenever you have two audio frequencies that are close together, they vibrate because sound moves in waves. So if you think about all sound is like it's physical, so it's moving through air. So it's literally like you just think of a wave going up and down and up and down, and it's literally just moving through air in a physical way. It's breaking through the air as it goes. And the speed of that vibration of the wave, so, something very, a deep sound like bass from, like your Slam and House track that we mentioned earlier, but more particularly the bass line, that the deep, bass line you would hear that's kind of hovering in the room during, amongst the kick drum. That is a really, really slow moving wave. And that's why whenever you're standing next to a subwoofer, you feel air coming through. It's because there's like so much force and it's so slow that it's literally like as the wave goes up and down, it's like that negative space is actually pushing, like physically pushing air through action. Right?
Is that's why it happens? Yeah, I never realized that. You can feel that whenever you put your hand in front of a little subwoofer you've got next to your TV, right? And
totally.
It just does the little sort of those puffs coming out.
Yeah, so it's literally like the sound wave is like pushing, it's moving the air out like that. So then as you start to move upwards in frequencies, so this bass tone, let's move up to think of like something like a hi-hat or even higher. That's going to be really fast. So the sound wave is going to be moving really, really fast, and it's going to look like kind of almost crinkled or something like that because it's moving so fast. And that's the high frequency, right? So that's like, or even the highest note on a piano or something is super fast. So if you really think about it, like spinning something up, whatever it is, doesn't have to be sound or music or anything. If you have something, you spin it up, it gets faster. The pitch kind of naturally rises, on anything like that. It's just the same property, the physical property that's happening in music and sound. So, back to the piano, you think about the piano. So this beating thing, the notes on like a piano, for example, or a guitar are all very close to each other. Like the frequencies, the vibrations, they're very close. And so if you play like a white and a black key on a piano that are right next to each other, you think about that. You hear that sort of wobbling, that like bon, 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 bon. That's the beating, because their frequencies are tuned individually. You know, one key is tuned to that note, the key is tuned to this other note, but they're very close together because on a piano, of course, you start from the lowest note to the highest note, it goes left to right, and they just kind of, with each key, they're incrementally tuned a little, a few, hertz higher and higher and higher, and so you've got this nice system that you can play on that sounds good. But if you play two notes that are right next to each other that are, minor and major, then you're going to hear that beating because they're so close to each other that they're actually, those sound waves are kind of interfering with each other. So if you think about that up and down wave thing happening, well, now you've got two notes. So you put two of those right next to each other and they're fighting for space in air. So you think about that subwoofer pushing the air out. So since all notes are moving through air, you've got these two notes that are kind of fighting for space. They're cycling at a similar speed and frequency. And so they're colliding. And so as they're colliding, that's what creates that wobbling sound. So when, again, on the piano, you hit two notes, black and white key right next to each other, you hear that wobble. That's literally the two frequencies fighting for space. And that's what creates the beating, because they're fighting in physical space, for room. And so that's what creates that sound. That's called the beating. So binaural beats is two, basically one headphone in one ear, one in the other. And then beating is the idea of two frequencies creating that wobbling sound by being very close to each other and kind of fighting against each other. So that's just to define terms for binaural beats, of just the actual terms. Now, the actual functional process of the tracks themselves, this is a little bit more detailed, but I'll try and make it as succinct as possible. So the overall intended effect is to be able to listen to these tracks and change the way that you're feeling, change the way that you're thinking and the way that your mind is operating. So you can, with intentionality of which track that you use, kind of coerce your brain into a different zone. So that would be either something relaxation, creativity, extreme heightened perception and focus, sleep, meditation, just general kind of alertness, but still feeling calm. These kind of different states that we go in throughout the day. Whenever you sleep, you're obviously very relaxed. And whenever you're in the peak point of your day in the afternoon, you're drinking coffee, you've just worked out, that's whenever your brain is firing. You're not in the flow state per se, but you're like in the alpha beta range where you're really keyed up. And then, at a high performance level, flow state is like the highest level of the brain. So throughout the day, we move through all of these different brainwave states. And those are really quickly delta, theta, alpha, beta, and gamma. So that's from lowest to highest. Now, what's interesting is that then these, so in our brains, the way that thoughts and these brainwave states are defined is basically our brain is a collection of neurons. It's a bunch of, and you please stop me at any time if I'm getting too far into
keep going. This is what we want to know.
Okay. I'm trying to cut it down as much as possible. So
it's fine. You're just trying to explain the single most complex object in the entire universe to us and how it relates with sounds that go into our ears.
Well, one of my favorite things about the brain is it spends its entire existence trying to make itself realize things, which is just really bizarre. So anyway, our brain is a collection of neurons, and our brain operates on electricity. And so the way we have thoughts, or the whole subsystems and different areas of the brain work at all, is that those neurons, they fire an electrical signal from one neuron to the next neuron upon a little road called a synapses. And that's basically, the synapses connect our neurons together throughout the brain. And there's like a billion-ish or whatever, or 2 billion, a trillion, who knows? They're always raising that number of how many neurons are in the brain. And so whenever we think, there's a series of neurons fire electrical signals through our synapses to these other neurons, and so on, in different areas of the brain. Kind of, they fire to each other, and it creates this interesting little dance. And the speed and frequencies of those electrical signals moving throughout the brain and the neurons firing are called brain waves. So that's where we get the term brain waves. This is literally like the same, just as you think of audio waves, it's like these rolling waves of electricity firing to the brain, and those are the brain waves. So that's the delta, theta, alpha, beta, gamma. These are the brain waves.
So would you be able to say that the brain waves are like an aggregate of the individual firings moving in a particular pattern that commonly goes together?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, we got it.
Right, exactly. So the idea with binaural beats is to be able to try and affect what brainwave state that you're in on demand. And so the concept behind the actual audio tracks is to put one of those tones in one ear at a particular frequency. So in the left headphone, you're going to have one particular frequency. Then in the right headphone, you're going to have another particular frequency, just a tone that's going. Now, the difference in hertz between those two tones is going to be the same difference of hertz that the speed of a particular brainwave state operates at. So, okay, so like for example, for a theta state, whenever the electricity, the neurons are firing, it's moving through the brain. That's generally happening at the speed of 4 to 8 hertz, somewhere in there ish. And so whenever we get more excited, we get more, the brain gets more amped up, we're processing faster, then that speeds up to 8 to 13 hertz or something like that, and it kind of continues to increase in these bands that they've labeled these different things. So let's just make it really simple. So we think of theta, and let's call it 4 hertz, right? So we're very relaxed. This is almost like a meditative type of state that we're in with theta. We're super calm, just kind of consciousness is very placid and open and everything. And so our brain waves are firing signals slowly and calmly, and think of 4 hertz. So it's just this very slow kind of boom, wow, 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 wow. That's the audio wave, the subwoofer in the brain moving up and down. So what we'd want to do to replicate that with a binaural beat is to put one frequency in the left ear. Let's call it 100 hertz. So that's a tone. That's the kind of like the crispest part of a kick drum, just for any audio engineers out there. Kind of 100 hertz. Then in the other ear, the other headphone, we're going to put 104 hertz. So just making it plain and using the metric system. Well, with 100 and then 104. So by putting 100 hertz in one ear, 104 hertz in the other ear, you think about what those two tones are doing whenever you listen to them together, right? They're creating the difference, that 4 hertz, because they're so close, they create that beating or that wobbling type of sound, right? And so in that creating of the 4 hertz vibration, the idea behind binaural beats is that then the brain, as it hears each of those tones in each ear, is trying to kind of mathematically make up the difference between those two frequencies as it's hearing those individual audio tones. And in that, it entrains. That's why they call binaural beats, brainwave entraining music. It's because it's then, the theory is that it entrains the brain into that theta state. So the brain waves start sort of replicating and sinking into the groove of the frequency that you're hearing. And then ideally your consciousness is then shifted into that particular brainwave state.
Can we hear something that is that particular theta, that bottom end one?
Yeah, we'll draw. Let's play this track called Opening Eye. That's the track that's theta, and we'll just play 30 seconds of that or something now. Okay, and we're back, and I mean, I feel relaxed. I don't know. Yeah, so if you can hear in that track, and there's other things going on. So we can hear the vibrating tones, but of course, in these tracks, of course, whenever you find these, you'll see that they're also accompanied by other like musical elements to make them musical, to make them not just this technical sort of thing that's happening. And depending on the artist, you can really create a lot of emphasis. So sort of just the beating tones are sort of the bare minimum to get the function going. Also, as a side note, just to further illuminate the conceptual nature of this, isochronic, or like it's a term for monophonic beating as well. So something that their particular objects have the propensity to beat on their own, even though they're just a single object because of their physical character.
Well,
so a gong. So that's exactly where I'm going. So you think about whenever in a Buddhist temple, there's a giant gong there, and before they sit down to meditate, they hit that sucker and it goes. Well, think about that sound. It's going boom, wow, 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 wow. It's the same thing. It's the exact same thing. So that's the beating, right? So you can take just that raw functional nature of it, and then based upon the whatever the artist's talent or purposes, you can then really scale that up to make it much more nuanced and succinct and impactful. And so you'll add, and of course, priority one is listenability. So you have two tones. You can add some. People usually put kind of textural ambient sounds on top of them to kind of give it a further relaxing sound. And also in ambient music, one of the points there is that you don't want rhythmic moments plotted in time per se, because you want it to be kind of off the grid. You don't want the listener to be, even if we're not doing it consciously, we subconsciously, when we listen to any music, pay attention to the rhythmic nature of things. And if we hear, one rhythmic sound, that we hear kick drum and then a snare, we're going to expect to hear on the same beat, in the same rhythm, another kick or snare, and so on and so on. We expect that. Like, imagine if you had your favorite hip hop track on and every like seventh kick drum was missing. You'd pull a hamstring or something to listen to that.
Maybe that's how I did my Achilles.
Yeah,
maybe I was listening to something that was 5 to the floor or something.
Yeah, because you're expecting this thing and it doesn't happen, and you're like,
Yeah.
So we have this, this, and even in cinematic music, there's very slow paced rhythms. We still expect this resolution to happen musically. So anyway, so in binaural beats, there's not rhythmic elements commonly because of that. You want the listener to kind of lose track of time, as it were, to further sink into the actual effect of the thing. So musically, there's generally just kind of textural things. Some people use nature sounds and stuff. I use those sometimes. But I also tend to use, on some of the tracks, I use my own just kind of some vocal drones, but also a lot of other kind of electronic sounds and various things. And just to go a little bit into my tracks, and if you'd like, I mean, I'm just kind of talking endlessly here, but please tell me at any point if there's any direction you'd like me to go. But
no, the only thing I was thinking before was that I imagine you could create a binaural beat without any of the extra elements to it, and it might perhaps have the desired effect but be so unengaging that your thoughts might sort of drift off elsewhere. Without in opening eye, you've kind of got these symbols and this sort of stuff in the higher registers as well that keep it more interesting, I guess.
Yeah, and also just listening to the tones, would make someone feel like they're in like Space Odyssey 2001, floating out. It would be very abstract and harder for people to relax into it because they're focusing on just this vibrating sound. It is interesting how the musical quality works as a sort of obfuscation of the technical element in some way. So you sort of aren't really focused on that as much. You're listening to the top layer, and the bottom layer is doing all the dirty work.
That's funny. You've Trojan horsed a really mindful music set in with something that sounds nice on top.
Yeah, that's right. And so in my tracks, I've spent 20 years, as an audio producer, and my whole life, also in that same time being a student of meditation and philosophy and studying consciousness, just all the neurosciences, cognitive sciences, neuroscience, consciousness, psychology, philosophy of mind, and et cetera, and music at the same time. And those things have always kind of woven into each other. They've been binaural beating my whole life, those two things. So I, in my music, it's always, the intentions have always been something that fascinates me a lot is listener expectation, the different things you can do musically, harmonically with notes, the arrival, the attention and relief and expectation that people hear, and kind of the emotions and feelings that arise through listening to different, orchestrated melodies and sounds. Also, the way that you can make sounds arrive and depart in I call it kind of musical sleight of hand, where it's like I have sounds that take, in my binaural beats, which are 30 minutes to an hour to 2 hours long, some sounds will fade in for 10 minutes. It takes that long for it to go from silence to its peak volume. And at the same time, other sounds are fading out for 10 minutes. And so they're kind of cross-fading, and there's a lot of that happening all at once. And so before you even realize there's a change, you're already somewhere else. And then before you realize where you are, there's yet another change. And it's a real sneaky and particular way to keep people from really paying attention to time, and when you're timeless, where are you? You're in the present, right? And so by doing that, it's a way to kind of musically guide people to the present moment.
There's an awful lot going on, man.
Yeah, there's a whole lot. Yeah, and I could, of course, nerd out on it very deeply, but also I got really interested in binaural beats whenever, in the early 2000s, because I've always been poking at my brain to see what happens. I'm just kind of use myself as a lab rat, for all sorts of different chemicals and experiments and whatever. But what got me interested in them was reading some rather esoteric writings on, Buddhism and kind of fringe meditation techniques and stuff way back in the early 2000s ish. And maybe even right before that. But I remember, so one of the things I was reading was that some monks would sleep on their right side if they wanted to have like a creative day the next day, and sleep on their left side if they wanted to have a more sort of systematic day. So the idea was that blood would saturate the right hemisphere of the brain or left hemisphere and so on. And I don't know how much, efficacy is in that bit of thing, but I'm sure that psychosomatically that you're sort of, it's a nice placebo effect. But I was reading things like that, and I was trying that, and that was interesting. And then I've always been fascinated with what particular frequencies, what they can do to the body. So the human body, that is. And so, if you play certain tones, like first off, if anyone doesn't think that tones can affect the body, let me remind you that there are, weaponized audio devices that the military and like kind of the militarized police use. They're basically these giant, well, not giant, not giant. They sort of look like, what is that, dish, like a satellite dish. And they play a really high pitch audio frequency that you can't even hear because it's like above the range of human hearing, which is like around 20,000 hertz. And it's above that, but it's super loud and above that, and it literally makes you pass out, or can cause extreme discomfort, headaches, disorientation.
No way.
Because you can basically like fry someone's nervous system with super high frequencies. So
shit, are those legal? Are they Geneva Conventioned out, or?
Yeah, they are in America anyway. But this is kind of Wild West, so who knows?
That's crazy. Yeah. That's like the South Park episode where they try and find the brown note.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That would be so much more funny if they used that, if they could do that instead of
make people poop their pants instead of passing out.
Yeah, totally. I mean, because then at least it's hilarious.
There's dogs in the nearby town when they're playing that thing going absolutely crazy, having a party.
Man, it. Yeah, we're wanting to, crawl out of their fur. So yeah, so these sounds, sounds really not only because they're just the physical nature of them, but also it's just the way that our body holds resonance as well. So we like a kick drum, a bass line makes it, like Daft Punk makes anybody want to kind of move a little bit because of the bass is like literally, it's hitting your. There's a lot of research that shows that like the bass frequencies and the rhythm of like dance tracks, the reason why those rhythms and those BPMs, those like beats per minute, make you want to dance, one of them is because they're like higher than the rate of resting heart rate. So if it's a little bit higher than your heart rate, it makes you want to kind of match that tempo. If you listen to something relaxing, you listen to some samba or something like that, it's like 60 beats per minute, or whatever. It's super relaxed.
Can you explain why Cardi B's WAP is done at 70 beats per minute then?
Well, maybe you should like watch some porn and then see if the rhythms in that match the rhythms in the in the track.
Fucking WAP, man. Yeah, I always noticed that. One of the things, I DJ'd for a short while when I was younger, and even now I can tell the difference between a DJ who's playing at sort of 125, 126 and 128, 129. 128 being sort of the classic, I guess, dance rhythm, the pacing.
Right.
And I went to go and see Ben Boma from Anjuna Deep on the beach at Dubai while I was out there, and the sun's setting over the horizon, and he's playing at like 123, and it's just so cool, super chill.
Yeah.
It was beautiful. And that insight, I even remember thinking back then, I was like, this is so slow. But he's managed to get it right. So even that particular rhythm, if he'd been playing those tracks pitched up to 128 or 129, it would have given a very different sort of sensation. And I suppose that we're talking here about gradations of how music has an effect on us, right? Like Cardi B's WAP had a different effect on me to the music of Anjuna Deep being played at sunset. And the rhythm is a part of that, as are obviously the lyrics, as is the kick drum and all the rest of it. But before we go on, let's play another one, man. What should we listen to next?
Yeah, sure. So this one, let's go with, this is kind of my personal favorite, is one called Luminosity. Cool. And this track is, I had so many people over the years, we're kind of going out of order here and just in the biography and kind of the reason of all these exist. But over the years, I had a lot of people hit me up asking me to make tracks for like psychedelic journeys or for, like extended meditation retreats or something like that. Basically how to get into that deep, deep part of the mind and really have some scaffolding and guidance there. And so for just rather sort of, I would call them ethical reasons. I didn't call them like music for psychedelics or music, whatever. Yeah. Because one, I think it's a little corny. And also I never, just kind of philosophically, I never want to be instructing people to do things or anything at all, much less, trying to, influencing people. So people do what you want, but, anyway, so it's called Music for Deep Work as the collection. And, and also it doesn't, I think we can do deep work in a lot of ways, with or without chemicals. And it's important to highlight that as well. So this is one of those tracks, and it's Luminosity. So, you can hear that track has more pronounced kind of musical qualities to it that are still sparse and stretched out. But it is going in that theta range, to get in that deep kind of creativity, very, very calm, relaxed type of zone. And some of the tracks, this one being one of those, I get a little tricky with them because I will take it from one brainwave state and slide down slowly over the course of the track sometimes, because people are already kind of keyed up as humans anyway. They're already kind of dialed up to and like tense and weird and fidgety and just stressed. And, we all are overly stimulated and oversaturated. So kind of starting from one place and then slowly have them sort of like sinking down into the sand, like as it goes on, which I don't know if I've ever mentioned that publicly, that I do that sometimes before.
Cheeky, Cory. But it's kind of like frog in boiling water type.
Yes,
argument,
exactly.
right?
Except for it's a hot tub, not a boiling pot.
Hot tub to cool bath. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So anyway, so sounds affect the body. And I've been really fascinated with that, over my life. And there's a lot of research out there, some weirdo fringe, stuff, some actually academic, over what particular tones can affect the body in what ways. And there's I have a huge archive of research from over, as I said earlier, the time that I was in my early 20s or late teens, early 20s, I got interested in this in the 2000, around the year 2000. And I just started researching and reading and collecting these different things. And I'd make these audio tracks with different frequencies to kind of see how they made me and other people feel. And it just kind of, my interest in that evolved from there. And so I did make some binaural beat tracks back then. And then I guess probably 5 or 6 years ago, what was funny is that my friend Aubrey hit me up and was like, "Hey, I want to try binaural beats. I've heard that they're really awesome. But do you think, have you ever made any?" And I was like, "Yeah, I don't know, 15 years ago." And he's like, "Would you be down to make some?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." So I made some, and I was just making them to make them. And then I let him listen to them. And he was just like, "Dude, what the fuck is this? This is crazy. These this is a what's happening here?" And so in the course of me making them, the last, the 15 years of compositional experience and music production experience all culminated in meditation, just familiarity with consciousness. And that ultimately also the awareness of the texture of my own mind in any given moment. I think becoming acutely aware of that became very valuable in making these tracks. And it's why they have kind of one of the reasons why they have kind of the magical quality that they do, is because through, 20 years of meditation, I've gotten to where I'm very aware of how my consciousness is shifting in the moment, where it's at, as I said, the texture of mind. And I also am aware of when that's being changed and influenced. And so in the creation of the tracks, I put a lot of detail, a lot of interesting little, tricky things in there, like I mentioned to you. And I'm kind of tuning them all musically, rhythmically, the actual frequencies themselves, until I feel that flow state shift in my own consciousness. And it's not even necessarily it's not like a mixing issue or a spatial issue or particularly a harmonic issue. It's more of just listening and getting the kind of the palette set, and then adding and moving everything until, in whatever way necessary, until I feel that shift within myself. And whenever I feel that flow kind of hyper presence portal open and dilate, I'm like, I got it. And there it is. And so that's sort of why all of these tracks have that quality to them, is because I'm literally tuning them to my own mind until I feel them turn the key, and when they turn the key, I'm like, there it is. Now it's just a matter of finishing it off.
Is it a different way to create a 2-hour-long binaural beat track that you're aiming to resonate with your mind in a particular way? Like if you're sat in the mixing studio, I imagine you must need to get yourself in quite a different place as if you're mastering down a hip hop track or something.
No, I mean, what's funny about that is that I don't know, I've gotten to where over the years, I'm kind of like a surgeon with music. It's not that I'm not clinical. It's not that I'm clinical about it in the sense that I don't have any feeling or care, but I'm very removed from being influenced by whatever I'm listening to generally. I try and, it's because I sort of want to remain objective in the process and not get swept up in it's strange. Like it's one of the confusing things about like Buddhism as well. Is we'll talk about cultivating a dispassion for everything, even for pleasure. And people are like, why would I want to not want to feel pleasure? It doesn't make any sense. But so kind of articulating that further, it's like, oh, well, you can enjoy the pleasure, but you don't want to crave and desire and to want the pleasure, or else it has control over you and it becomes a point of suffering, because whenever that thing fleets, as all things do, then you have a void and you seek, this pleasure again. You have the passion for the pleasure, you go look for it, and you begin to suffer, and then that kind of daisy chains on with all of the elements of suffering. So by cultivating a spacious dispassion for pleasure, then when a pleasure comes, you can deeply enjoy it and receive it, but still not be addicted and have the craving that creates the suffering. That's kind of how I look at music production. Is like I have a dispassion for it in the sense that I'm here, I receive it when it's happening. I do instinctively and intellectually what I know needs to happen to it, but don't get caught up in all of the human stuff with it.
I'm absolutely adamant that Cardi B felt the same way when she was recording the lyrics to What. And Megan Thee Stallion, she was very, very famous for her principle of non-attachment.
Yeah, that track had quite an effect on you.
I'm absolutely blown away by it, man. I find that track particularly, and then the associated social media furor that came out after it, to just be fascinating. And that's a whole nother discussion that I think we could get into. But
it's a great track, and Megan Thee Stallion is amazing. Like her new album is, I don't know if you've heard her album that came out last Friday, but yeah, I recommend that.
Yeah. So next, what have we got next? Let's play another song. We've played the Luminosity and Opening Eye. What else have we got?
Yeah. So we'll go into yet another direction. I'll just wrap up what I was talking about real quickly. And that is, so I gave these tracks to Aubrey and he listened to them and was like, man, this is amazing. And so as we kind of talked about them a little bit further, we we're like, he's like, maybe we should like offer these to people. We could sell them, put them on his website. This is before I even had like a store on my website. He's like, we could put them on my website and see who digs them. And so I did we did some podcasts, we talked about them, and they just like, the response was just crazy. It was like, I never would have anticipated the amount of feedback and like response and stuff that listeners had to the Binaural Beats. It started where I think it's kind of since then, I've never not got a message, a day without someone saying, like, dude, I listen to these every day. Thank you.
What's the most common usage that you've found people use them for?
I think two things, either meditation or for focus. So, and we'll get to the focus thing right after this. And so, yeah, man, it was really fascinating. I ended up licensing those to Onnit, and so that was cool. Like they became a nice kind of fixture within the Onnit world, and expand out from there. And then I just kind of continued in my own way to like, okay, well, I made those. Let me continue on to the different intentional purposes of each one that people are hitting me up and asking for. And also I'm constantly, my curiosity and then drive to kind of, I don't know, I guess improve upon a craft and like hone in something just is natural. And so I'm always like, well, let's see if I can, how powerful and potent can I make these?
Dude, I mean, I still say that the Release Into Now meditation series that you did, which will be linked in the show notes below, is still my favorite guided meditation. For anyone who wants to take it to the next level, it's, in my opinion, it's a big ask for a beginner, because the sessions are like half an hour. But if you've spent a little bit of time and you've built up a base level of a habit, like that thing just over the space of 6 weeks, just totally supercharges your. There's not a single person that I've said you need to go and get this to kind of level up your meditation game, and they haven't come back and gone like, what the fuck was that?
Oh man, that's awesome to hear. Thank you.
One of my buddies did it, and I think he really struggled for the first few. This is a compliment, I think, but he struggled for the first few days to stay awake during them, and he found himself just immediately going to sleep, even if he'd slept perfectly fine the week before. But this is also a friend to whom I sent Sam Harris explaining determinism and our lack of free will, and it sent him into a 2-week spiral of depression. So I've done quite a lot. I've done quite a lot to this friend over the last year. So Luke, I want to apologize to you again, buddy. I didn't mean to.
And also, man, Luke, check out compatibilism. That's another. That's maybe that'll settle better with you.
That is the antidote.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'll interject there, man. There's a recent Daniel Dennett paper that he just published on expanding free will. Have you seen this?
No, but
I'll send it to you. I'll send it to you once I'm done. And anyone that wants to read it, it's available for free if you just search "Expanding Free Will" Daniel Dennett on Google. Really fascinating study. I was reading that sleep deprived on the way back from Dubai, and that made for that was the visual equivalent of binaural beats, I think, as I'm reading these words and I'm trying to work out what the hell is going on. But yeah, man, releasing to now, like I say, anybody that wants to kind of really up-level their meditation game, just go and do that over the space of 6 weeks. You will change an awful lot about how you see meditation, I think.
Oh, well, thank you, man. Thank you. It's interesting is that, again, I made that, 5-6 years ago, and people still, are supporting it and very interested, and they're always coming to it, and it's interesting to me. I actually went back and listened to some of it because I was like, well, it's been 5 years. And that was my first attempt at ever teaching anything. And so I was just like, I hope it still holds up. And it was kind of refreshing. I clicked through some of it and I was like, okay, it's still pretty solid.
Not embarrassed about that old work.
Yeah. Also, as a funny side note on Daniel Dennett, I've been, his book, Consciousness Explained, I got in the late 90s, I think. And that was a big impact on me whenever I was a teenager. And I really liked that one. And I actually emailed Tufts University whenever I was 19, 20 or something, and asked if I could come be a free, an intern or assistant for Daniel Dennett. And they didn't reply. But it's been.
Come on. Little did Daniel Dennett know that he just turned down the opportunity to get free binaural beats for life.
Exactly. Yeah. I think he's more interested in sailing and hanging out on the coast.
He's an interesting dude. So one of the things I've noticed is that the two areas that you mentioned were deep focus and meditation. So quite mindful, quite open, quite present. But you mentioned that we've got these higher ranges as well that we go into in terms of frequencies. Is that something that you just don't think people really need, or is it something that you actively tend to avoid in terms of creating binaural beats?
No, it's an important one. It's one of the most popular. So that's what it's a good primer to move into the next thing. And so I guess a lot of the work I do generally through the meditation course or my podcast or, the music, a lot of it is about trying to get people to calm down. You know what I mean? Calm down, relax, be present, and sort of wake up to their own awareness. That's what a lot of my stuff does. So also the counterpoint to that, the balance to that, is the extreme focus, the flow state, the gamma state. So the gamma state is the highest state. Is heightened perception, flow, kind of existence, mind. And so, yes, that is a lot faster of a vibration. That's generally 40 to 60 hertz. Some people clock it at about 100. But I think that 40-ish to 60-ish is right. Just in the way that I've felt whenever I've experimented with them. So on the first set of binaural beats I made, which I mentioned to you that I shared with Aubrey, there was a track on there called Gamma Flow, and that was basically, it's pretty self-explanatory, but it was meant to be that was a collection, so that you get all sorts of different tracks in that collection, and that was the flow state track. And that one I think has been one of the most popular of all time, because it's really apparently has had a profound effect on listeners, helping to get into their concentration state and their flow state. And the amount of people that have emailed me over the years that have said, hey, I wrote my entire book to this. I wrote my PhD. Yeah. I listened to this on repeat. So people have sent me screenshots of their Apple, on iTunes, the amount played, the play count. Here's Gamma Flow played, 230 times. I'm like, 230 times, that track's half an hour long, and I listened to it for a year on repeat while I was finishing my PhD thesis or whatever.
Shit.
And it's just endless. Yeah. And so that track people have really, really like for flow state. And yeah, so there's that one. And then after that, because people dug that so much, I ended up making the second volume of Binaural Beats I released with Aubrey are all flow state tracks. So it's 4 different flow state tracks. So we can play some of Gamma Flow right now.
Yes.
So that's that one, yeah, and it's pretty minimal and spacious, but you can probably feel that flow happening. And these are of course 30-second-ish samples that we're playing here, and the reason the tracks are so long is that in general in play length from 30 minutes to 2 hours is because the idea is the kind of longer you listen to it, the longer your brain, has, the longer time has to kind of sink into it, get into the zone. I think that generally they say it's about, at least kind of 2 to 4, 5 minutes to really open the door, and there it's another kind of 5 minutes to get further into sort of like meditation, further into it, and then so on and so on. And once you kind of hit the 10 to 20 minute mark, you're really sailing.
What's it's like a whooshing sort of air wind sound in that gamma flow track. What's that do?
Yeah. Oh, that's kind of that's meant as the stereo effect to really confuse time. So, and it actually is a recording of air that I took. It's like the coast recording of the like waves.
I was going to say, how do you record air?
Yeah, very sneakily, very quiet.
Got to creep up on it, right? Because it's vigilant.
Real quiet room and a powerful microphone. Now, speaking of that, as a side note, you ever heard of an anechoic chamber before?
Yes, but I can't remember what it is.
It's like a soundless room. So there's basically, it's designed inside to where there's no reflections. So basically, whenever we hear sound, we're generally hearing the reflections of sound, not the actual sound itself. So if you're in a room and you talk, you're not really hearing your voice. You're hearing your voice bounce off the wall behind you and off the ceiling and off the floor and so forth. But in that's why music studios have sound absorption and panels, because it wants to break those reflections and those resonances so that the microphone can actually record the source instead of the sound of the room. Also, interestingly enough, since we're in a sound wormhole, every space has its own frequency. So the square footage of a room and the material that the room is made out of, like the area of the room, it itself has a tone. So when you're talking in your room, the width and length and height of the room itself, and as I said, the material of the wall, so how the reflections are coming, actually have its own tone. So if you speak in one room, there's a different kind of passenger in there with you, and that's why auditoriums and music halls are very precisely, designed so that they don't have that, or they have an amplifying effect, but no real resonant effect.
I remember once in one of the nightclubs that we were working out of, it had a huge back wall. So you can imagine it's got this high ceiling, and then halfway down the room, this high ceiling chops down into a low ceiling that continues to go. And the speakers at the front were throwing toward the back. And upon refurb, the builders had taken down this huge frame. It was like a image sort of poster, kind of like a thick poster at the back on this main back wall. And they'd taken those down, and the guys sound checked and threw the speakers back on in this new configuration. And it sounded so quiet. Like they were blasting these speakers to hell, and it sounded super, super quiet. And what we realized was that back wall, the painting poster thing, had actually been a bunch of conical sound absorbers. And what you were getting was the sound being thrown from the front, hitting itself on the way back from the wall and getting almost completely zeroed out. which was insane. You could turn it up super, super loud, and it would just sound like nothing because the sound hit the back wall, hit itself, and then just killed it.
Yeah, that's like a low frequency oscillator, like an LFO. You'll see that on synthesizers or even like a wah pedal, like for guitar, like Jimi Hendrix. That's like an LFO. So it's like creating a subsonic sound that actually. So subsonic sounds are frequencies that are below even like, human hearing, like way below, hence the term subsonic. And they're so deep and, the wave is so big that it pushes like sounds out of the air. And so with a wah pedal, that's why it sounds wah wah whenever you move the pedal. It's because it's literally creating like a break, in the actual sound, or even like a tremolo effect when you hear something going like statically, da 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 da. That's because it's just like literally there's a subsonic frequency pushing out all of the audio there in a rhythmic way that's like just blasting it out, so it cancels it out.
There's a club in Glasgow called the Sub Club, and that has a subsonic dance floor. So it's got subsonic speakers built into the actual dance floor itself. So when you have bass tones that come through that, you feel it through your feet.
Nice.
That's
very
awesome.
Cool. That's like that would drive elephants mad. Elephants, they can send. I read something sometime is that they can like hear each other from miles away because bass travels obviously, and they can send like sounds that are so deep that the bass will just travel like a mile or something. And of course they got big ass ears, and so that I just think it's so interesting for an animal. It's of course their size and like their resonance. They're a big old. That's a big double bass right there. But like just an animal being able to send that deep of a bass sound is such a peculiar. It's like, what if you could emit a subwoofer sound from your body,
upon demand?
Yeah, that's like kind of what they're doing. It's sort of wild.
Some of the blue whale noises and stuff as well, those can go for absolutely. I know obviously that sound conduction in water is significantly better than it is through air. But totally. Yeah, that goes for forever, right?
Yeah. Okay, so I don't remember where we were really. I remember
flow state,
talking
gamma
about,
flow. We did that one.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, we did that one. So that's a really great one. People would dig that. And the second collection was for all for flow. And so since then, I've mainly created tracks that are for meditation, for relaxation, for the deep work and so on. And I think that moving on to perhaps the last piece is one for sleep. So that's another thing that people hit me up so much about, and I got so many messages of people saying like, "Hey, I've been working like this is pre lockdown times, but people saying like I've been working 10 hours a day and going to like university at nighttime, and I have 2 kids." And I'm like on the verge of just a mental breakdown. And like, I'm so fried and freaked out by the end of the day, I can't sleep. And the only thing I've been able to sleep is someone hooked me up with one of your tracks. And this has been helping me like de-escalate and get to sleep at night. So just thank you, whatever. I have gotten that message, like 100 times. And it made me realize like, okay, people need something for sleep. And then, of course, as tends to happen in this weird world, as I started thinking about that, of course, I started having people message me requesting like, "Hey, you ever thought about making tracks for sleep?" Yeah. Okay. That's clear. What is next? And so I made the tracks for sleep. And these are really deep. These are delta tracks. So these are, to guide the mind literally to like dreamless sleep, complete like lack of body awareness type of zone. And obviously people aren't going to be sleeping with headphones in most times. But I made the tracks like 2 hours long. So the idea is that you get in bed, and then you start listening to one of these, maybe you're reading or something like that. And then in that hour that you're kind of like chilling out before you actually try and sleep, you're already listening to that, getting into the zone. And then, once you turn the lights off and probably take the headphones off, then you're going to be like right there. So it can help you. It's kind of like a sleep primer is how I
pre-workout
it. But there's a lot of, it's interesting. There are actually a lot of people out there that do use like, there's headbands with like ear earbuds built
So
in.
Muse, the guys who do that portable EKG, the brain sensing headband for meditation. Yeah. So I just got popped by one of their ads the other day, and they've created something that must track your brain waves or your brain states while you sleep.
Yeah, that's their. I know Ariel Garten, the founder of Muse, and she was telling me a while back, like last year, that was their next product. So it's cool that it's out.
It's come to market, man. I've seen it. But yeah, you're totally right. The world for this stuff, there's State App, which is by Brian McKenzie, which is a breathwork application. And then there's Silent Mode, which is a face mask with inbuilt headphones and accompanying music to do breathwork to. And then there's wearables like Muse that were originally for seated meditation with audio feedback, and now are going into brain tracking whilst you're asleep. And like the wearables market is just like it's going in all directions at once. Yeah.
It's funny is I actually don't like any of that stuff. People, they send them to me, but I'm just like, I don't need another like band to strap on.
I keep, don't use the word strap on. I
don't need another strap on to strap on. Got so many.
I have 3 already. Being honest, man, I've struggled with pretty much everything that I've tried. I keep my Whoop strap on as an activity tracker. But we were talking about this while I was away. It really doesn't feel like anyone's kind of captured the wearables market in the same way. If you think about the kind of leap that Apple had with the iPhone and just how much of a chasm there was between that device and everything else that's before it. And I don't think we've had that yet with wearables. You've got the Apple Watch, but a perfect example of this, Rory Sutherland, regular Modern Wisdom guest, he suggested that he thinks if Steve Jobs was still around, the Apple Watch wouldn't be made. He thinks it's too complex, too unintuitive, too highly priced, and too user inefficient. And I'd never heard it before, but I actually thought, do you know what it is? I buy everything from Apple. Like they bring something out, I upgrade my laptop, I upgrade my phone fairly regularly. I've never had any desire to buy an Apple Watch, and I think he might be right with that. And the idea of wearables is right, but I think the execution thus far, pretty much industry-wide, is just a bit lacking.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not a fan. I have an Apple Watch, but I'm not like
begrudgingly.
Yeah, I like it, but I only wear it whenever I go out or go running or something like that. But I just don't care about like data. I know to each their own, of course, and for some people it's very useful. But to me, there's the show Schitt's Creek. I don't know if you've ever seen that. It's quite funny. But Dan Levy is like going on a hike with his boyfriend, and he's like, "Oh, my Apple Watch is dead," or whatever. And he's like, "There's no point in even hiking if it's not like if I'm not getting the track, and like I don't care."
We'll do it again tomorrow. Did you see? So one thing that I will say that was a fairly big game changer is, for me, knowing how much time I've been asleep. I'm aware that there's a margin of error here, but the waking up on a morning and being able to look and know that I got 7 hours of sleep, or 7.5, or 8, or 8.5, or 5, as opposed to the old world before wearables, which was just going to bed at a time and then waking up at a time and not really knowing. That has definitely informed the way that I operate a lot more effectively, and I can compensate for sleep debt and kind of play around with things. But you're right, if you're not drilling into the data, I think a lot of devices, almost all of them, put out so much more than you need. And then unless you act on the data that you get from a wearable, like what's the purpose of it? It's just like this sort of masturbatory game of producing data for the sake of indexing it.
Exactly, man. Yeah, it's further distraction, in my opinion, in a lot of cases. Again, for me, but for some people, I'm sure it's incredibly useful.
I got it.
I have had a lot of people send me. Speaking of, things like Muse, and I think Whoop has some similar data, just showing your neural feedback, or also your kind of real time heart rate or whatever change. is people have sent me screenshots where they're like, man, this is before, like this is a 6 month kind of like a shot here of before I started listening to, you're using your meditation course or binaural beats, and then after, and like look at the difference. And it's been like, it's crazy when people send them to me. I should try and ask if I should put those on my site or something, but they like, it's just like a complete, like, inverse. It's like a total difference. It's really, really cool to see.
That's crazy. I've got Joel Jameson from 8 Weeks Out. He works with a lot of UFC fighters, getting them down to the right weight, but he's also one of the world experts in HRV training, like literally probably #1 on the planet. And I've got him on the show later this month, and I'm going to bring up the binaural beat stuff with him, because him affecting people's HRV in a appropriate way is pretty much what he spends his time doing. And HRV is an indicator of relaxation. Inversely, you want a high HRV and a low resting heart rate, optimally. But yeah, that's definitely one of them. And when you think about what most of the recovery strategies for athletes are doing, what they're trying to get them to do is just get into a parasympathetic state.
Right.
Anyhow, is it by massage? Is it by going on a recovery walk in nature?
Right.
Like, is it by sleeping more? Whatever it might be, just trying to get that HRV up and that resting heart rate down. So yeah, man, I think I'll tell you what. Why don't we listen to? It'll be Into the Void. Is that the sleep one?
No, that was Lunar Flow.
Oh, well, you're messing me up with the names now. Why don't we listen to Lunar Flow?
And so then now also, I think we're in a good neighborhood, and of course time is shrinking here. So we can move into the Void, which that is also another deep Delta track as well. So it's kind of a good companion. This is from the first collection way back when. But I think this is the one I think Aubrey has called the Dry Float. He's like, it's like being in a float tank, but not in the tank. So this is the Into the Void track. Okay, and then coming out of that one, I think just, with a few minutes remaining, touching quickly on some of the research around this stuff is important, because, some people are willing to just try a binaural beat or something and see if it works for them. And okay, cool, I like this and it makes me feel a certain way. Some people are a bit resistant to it because they're like, okay, this is a little skepticism, which I think is healthy. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I say with anything like that, just give it a shot. And if it works for you, then cool. If not, then that's cool too. But there's a lot of research, and increasingly so in over the last few years, even they've become very popular, and for treating anxiety and different traumas, and kind of going through traumas and things like that. But really for treating anxiety and trying to get people out of their even in a clinical state of dealing with anxiety. So one case in particular that I enjoyed, that I was actually a part of, was a research team in Australia in one of the universities, two, which unfortunately now I can't recall which one it was, because it's been a year or two since I worked with them, but one of the major ones. And so they had a neuroscientist there that was basically playing my tracks, and I created some actually test tracks so they could use kind of a control study thing going on. So some of
Did
them
you
would
make a binaural beat that wasn't a binaural beat?
Yes. So I made one with just the musical elements, and then one with the musical elements and the tones. So they had like a controlled track going on. So they would put people in there, mainly people that were, struggling from psychological issues, or anxieties, whatever it might be. Put them in the fMRI scanner, which is just kind of the brainwave reading machine, we'll call it that. And they would then monitor kind of how their mind was reacting and how their heart rate was reacting to it. And they showed, very clear success through that brain imaging that the track with the tones was affecting, the brain in the way it was supposed to, in the sense of creating relaxation, slowing down the brainwave patterns in the firing of neurons. So it's very, very fascinating. I think that a lot of them in the academic sense have been used or have been getting a lot more traction for use in therapy sessions and stuff like that, and just general overall kind of wellness for people who are suffering psychologically and just kind of getting that recovery in.
That's the acute state change. Have we had a look? Have you had any research to do with the trait change, other than people sending you their heart rates steadily decreasing over a 6-month period?
Yeah, there have been several studies of selections of people who have kind of been interviewed and taken readings and different data points and so forth on their kind of resting levels of stress and anxiety and whatever, and then kind of used the tracks over a course of time, and then gone back and gone in for more testing and monitoring and so forth, and shown improvements and a reduction. They're all based on anxiety. I think that's where you can get the funding for studies like that. Improvements on the reductions of their anxiety and kind of their resting heart rates and things like that. So yeah, it's all interesting. Yeah, and I like reading about those things now and again. But I think for me, for stuff like that, I'm mainly just kind of like, you could go read a bunch of reports. It's kind of, I feel like that was supplements too, where it's like you can read all about them, or you could just take one and see how you feel.
Yeah, and that again, if you could bottle the placebo effect, you'd have the most powerful effect in all of pharmacology, right? So the point is, whatever works for you, and the mode by that happening kind of is a little bit irrelevant. So if someone's thinking, that sounds good, Cory, you've sold me on binaural beats, mate, what is your suggested dosing? Is it more effective with speakers if they've got good quality speakers, or with headphones, and how often, and etc.? Yeah,
definitely with headphones. How often you can listen to them, that's up to you. How often you want to try and induce the effect. I listen to them during meditation. A lot of them are made for meditation, and it's very valuable. And given that they're 30 minutes long, it's like you don't have to worry about a timer or anything. You just turn it on, and when the track's done, you're done. And also, I think another valuable time is that, I've had a lot of people reach out to me and say that whenever they're feeling kind of like in a crisis mode of just like really overwhelmed, really stressed with work or a relationship or whatever, and they're in that kind of like panicky, like, that state, to drop one on, to remember to use them then, and drop one on, just kind of lay down and take a little 10-minute chill, very useful in times like that as well. Also, apparently, if you're writing a book or working on your PhD, then the gamma track is very valuable. But yeah,
I was listening to Adam Gazzaley, who's a neuroscientist, on Sam Harris's podcast the other day, and he has got stage 3. He's going into stage 3 FDA approval for brain training games that are made to force single focus, specifically to be used to combat ADD. But these games would actually require a prescription for you to get them, which I thought, I don't understand. Like, it's just a game. But as with many things, something that can cause a positive change can also cause adverse reactions if not used properly or supervised or blah, blah, blah. But I wonder if down the line we'll see prescriptions written, or perhaps at least doctors recommending binaural beats as part of a recovery protocol for someone who's post-surgery or PTSD or anxiety, depression, any number of psychological issues.
Yeah, a lot of therapists recommend them already for people that are kind of dealing with just mental health challenges, depression, anxiety, as you said, PTSD, things like that. Yeah, they're just they're like, hey, listen to one of these and call them in the morning,
I love it, man. I absolutely love it. Look, Cory, it's been awesome to have you on. 2.5 years, dude, and it was very well worth the wait.
Yeah, it's crazy how time flies when you're in the present.
Absolutely. People want to check out your stuff. Where should they go?
Cory-Allen.com. That's just Cory-Allen.com. It's all there. The Binaural Beats, the Releasing to Now course, my podcast, of course.
Astral Hustle. Go and check it out.
Yep. It's all there.
Peace. Dude, thank you so much for today.
Yeah, thank you, man. Really appreciate you having me on.